I'm Beck and welcome to a book recommendations video. This is scary books for scaredy cats because I don't really read horror books, but I do like books that have a bit of an eerie atmosphere. Sometimes they can be a little bit gruesome, but I don't like horror to be the overarching thing about a book that I pick up. So I've gathered together 6 books, and I think if your reading taste crosses over with mine, you'll probably enjoy these too. The first one is called This Delicious Death, and this is such a fun but also mildly gruesome story, and it follows 4 girls who are going in their senior year of high school to a music festival. They're about to start college, and several years ago in this world though, there was an event called the Hollowing, and that's when, because of various things in the world, people got a stomach flu and it turned them into ghouls. But these girls are hollows, so they're ghouls, but they've been reassimilated into society again because of what's called sin flesh, which is synthetic flesh. So ghouls could be reassimilated. Society has very much returned to normal, I guess, and now they're just girls wanting to go to a music festival, and one of the things they bring with them is a cooler full of sin flesh and then also a cooler full of alcohol, as you do. While they're at the music festival though, they run into a group of boys, and one of these boys turns up dead, and one of the girls, Val, ends up losing control. And so the girls uncover this mystery conspiracy out in the desert where this music festival is, and they are wanting to get to the bottom of it, so that's what they try and do. And it's just such a ridiculous but fantastic romp. This is supposed to be taken like a little bit seriously. It's also got fantastic world building and character growth because it shows you flashbacks as well as the story, and for me that didn't take me out of the story, it added to it, which is a very special skill, because I find that if you move away from the narrative that I'm interested in, oftentimes I'll go, oh, I don't want to read this anymore, and put the book down. But this one had a very fine balance, so it very fine-tuned the 4 girls that we were following, and I also loved the sapphic romance and how sweet and innocent it was, despite these characters being ghouls and literally like being able to eat humans. It was just such a fun time, which I wouldn't expect to describe a ghoul book as, but it was, and I think more people should know about this and read it. Then you've probably seen this on a few other lists, but it's one of the few more horror focused books that I've read, and that is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Now, if you're anything like me with my reading taste, I prefer a bit of a supernatural twist if I'm going to read anything horror related. So that's what I went for this book for, because it had a vampire in it. This one follows Patricia Campbell. She is a housewife in the South in about the 90s, and she gave up her job as, I think, a nurse, and now she's caring full time for her kids while her husband ticks all these boxes regarding his career, and her brain is kind of going stagnant and she's very frustrated. So she ends up joining or co-starting a book club, and all of these women that go to the book club, they start kind of mundane and they go, this isn't really for me, and then they start reading like crime, thriller, horror books like Ted Bundy and all of that kind of thing. They realize they've got a interest in true crime, and their interest in true crime is building as this new person comes to town, and then these kids start going missing. So they're like, we need to investigate this guy because something is not right in this town. How is he so charismatic and friendly with everyone all of a sudden while there's stuff being swept under the carpet? So they try and investigate him, and it's a spooky, eerie, grotesque story. He's definitely a vampire. There's no question about that. It's not like magical realism or all in their head like something's gone down with him and it's not good. And this book very successfully gave me the heebie-jeebies, but I also loved the solidarity between the women. It was such a great story for that reason. And yeah, it was just creepy. So I think if you like, you know, horror and you want to kind of dip your toe in, this is a great one to do that with. Whereas the first book was more of like a fun slasher kind of thing, but this is more like psychologically and physically gruesome, whereas the first one was just like slapdash, if you know what I mean. Then we're deviating a little bit with Parable of the Sower, because while this could be considered like a horror, it's also a sci-fi book because it follows Lauren Alamina, and she's living in this encampment in this world. It's actually the year 2024, which is kind of terrifying, but at the time it was written, that was the far future. And we're following Lauren and her family within these walls because they are trying to protect themselves from the outside world, and the outside world has been massively influenced by this drug. It turns people insane, and they're trying to scavenge and grow food, and it's not going as well as they hoped. Her father, Lauren's father, is a preacher, so he's trying to restore faith and hope through religion, but that's not really doing well either. And one day their camp is attacked, a lot of people are killed, and Lauren escapes, and she has to then survive outside of the encampment, outside of the walls. And she runs into people along the way, and it's about how she starts to develop her own religion that's linked to nature and inspire hope and trust with other people as well. And I think because it's a apocalyptic book, people might write it off if they don't read that genre. And I don't think it should be written off, because this is one of my favorite books of all time, and it does a fantastic spin on the apocalyptic setting. And I think because of Lauren's character growth and the people she runs into and how there's a constant threat to survival and needing to be aware, that has its own level of horror. You're kind of always looking over your shoulder. And I think that's why I love this book so much, because it brought that survival aspect to the front and center, but it also brought hope as well, and an element of realism. Plus it's, the year 2024, which is mildly terrifying. So I would highly recommend this one, especially if you want something a little bit different. I think this will really work for you. Then if you're more into the almost gothic horror, you'll probably enjoy this one, and that is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. And this one is set in one of the shabby streets of Madrid. It follows Lucia, and she is a servant, I guess, to this wealthy woman. And Lucia is trying to hide any propensity she has for magic and blend in with everyone around her. Unfortunately, it would not be a story if Lucia managed to hide her magic, so one day her scornful mistress sees something and it can't just be swept away. And from that point on, the mistress starts scheming. Lucia gets caught up in court politics and presented to the king. And there, Lucia runs into the disgraced secretary, Antonio, of the king. And the king and Antonio intend to use Lucia's magic for their own gain. So there was a recent war that suffered many casualties, so they want to make up for that and have an edge, and they're hoping to be able to do that with Lucia's magic. So it's more of like a dark magic, morally grey, political story. So it fits very much into that gothic scene, and Leigh Bardugo writes that atmosphere so well. I could feel it, like I wanted to cut through it. When I was reading it, it was that palpable. While there's also a magical trial of sorts, I wouldn't read this story wanting a magical trial, because I started this book for that reason and it didn't match my expectations. It very much suits the gothic atmosphere, the magic and the political alliances. There's also a character, and I need to read his name because my brain can't pronounce it, and it is Gulian Centangle, and he's a familiar, an immortal familiar of the king or the prince, I believe, and he gets caught up in it as well, and Lucia tries to use him to her own gain as an ally. And obviously, because it's a gothic horror, it doesn't always go the way you would expect it to. So for that reason, it very much fits that spooky vibe. The cover alone is very Halloween. It suits October to a T. So I feel very safe giving this recommendation. It's one of Leigh Bardugo's titles that is probably not at the forefront anymore, more so Ninth House, which I would also recommend because that's a dark academia and it very much fits the vibe of spooky season. So I guess I'd recommend both. I love Ninth House, but I enjoyed The Familiar, if your taste is anything like mine. Then the last two on this list are less horror and gothic, and they're more just like featuring ghosts or magic and having a spooky atmosphere without being too serious. So one of those is Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune, and I initially didn't think I would like this book. Wallace, our protagonist, is a lawyer, and at the beginning of the book he dies, and he is so pretentious and rude that I was like, do I want to stick with this narrative? But sticking with it is worth it, because Wallace is attending his own funeral. He gets picked up by a reaper and brought to almost like a crossroads before you die. You've got to process things for 7 days as a ghost and then cross over. And that crossover point is Hugo's tea shop, and real people come to the tea shop, but so do ghosts, and Hugo's job is to see them and help them cross over. And now Wallace has to put to rest his life and then live his own understanding of life in the final 7 days that he has, because he was such a horrible person in life. He is now repenting and realizing on everything that he missed out as a ghost. So it does get a little bit existential, but it also is literally about ghosts. So that's why it came to mind when thinking of Halloween. The last line of the synopsis sums it up so well, and it says, hilarious, haunting and kind, Under the Whispering Door is an uplifting story about a life spent at the office and a death spent building a home. It is cozy, it is kind and sweet, but it also is a little bit existential. It's about ghosts, and it's just great because it's not a spooky story, it's not scary, so I think it's perfect if you are a scaredy cat like me and you don't want to read horror. This is a great one. And then finally we've got a novella, and people might disagree about this one being spooky, but I think it's a little bit eerie, and it is in an absent dream. And even though this is the 4th or 5th book in the Wayward Children series, you can very much read this as a standalone. So if you want to read the series, start from the beginning, but if you just want to dip your toe in, definitely go for this one. And it follows the story of a serious young girl, and she doesn't want to be married off and be someone's housewife, so she decides to run away. In this series and in this world specifically, when kids run away, they end up finding doorways to magical worlds that very much suit who they are and their personalities. So this girl runs away and she encounters a doorway to the goblin market, and it's a world founded on logic and reason, but also riddles and lies. And she thinks she's found her own personal paradise, but alas, she makes a bargain that doesn't play out the way she thinks, and the time spent there doesn't work out the way she wants it to. So it is spooky in the sense that it's got that eerie magic of the goblins. There's kind of something sinister lurking under the surface. Even though it might look like a place of logic and reason, there are still definitely loopholes. So it's not a safe place at all. And I think that's why I thought of it when recommending spooky books for scaredy cats, because while it's not outwardly like jump scary, horror, psychological, it is also sinister but soft, and it kind of gets under your skin, but in an evocative way that makes you think rather than freaks you out. So that's why I wanted to put this on here. It's one of my favorites of the Wayward Children series, and any chance I get, I will recommend it because it's great. So if you have picked up any of the books that I have recommended, or if you've read them before, please let me know down below. If you want more book recommendations, or if you want to keep up to date with what I'm currently reading, please like it and subscribe. But thank you again so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you down in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.